The other day, my sisters and I were discussing the fact that it was possible that we would not be here in perhaps a very short time, and that our children and grandkids and great-grandkids would have very little idea of our past. I'm Joe Lor, and I have 4 sisters who'd love to tell you a wee bit about their lives here on YouTube. We chose YouTube because this platform offers the opportunity for observers like you to be able to make comments and ask questions about what we said. Besides, it also gave us an opportunity to answer via text your questions and comments. Gloria, who's our family historian, says that the Lor Family History starts about 1880 with Lord Jock Wing, our grandfather, who decided to leave the village in China and ends up starting at laundry in Brockville, Ontario. My sisters and my history starts about 1931 with the birth of Alice, 1 year after New York Cafe was born in Brockville. Today I'm going to tell you what it was like being the second youngest Lor and only boy in a family of 5 girls, born at the start of World War II, and tell us what it was like to grow up in a small town and somehow end up in Toronto as a market researcher, return to live in Brockville and influence millions of people, and have my first name, which can be legally spelled J-O or J-O-E. It was a time when they delivered milk to our door from a milk wagon pulled by a horse. We built snow forts on King Street. In the winter, I rode sleds down Market Square, and men shoveled snow from the streets into trucks. And my birth seemed like a miracle to my dad, that he had a boy after 3 girls were born. As far as what I remember about World War II, I remember being dressed in a uniform as a child. I remember being on my tricycle in the Victory over Japan parade, and during the war we learned how to make tank tracks in the snow. At our cottage we swung on the swings our dad made for us, fished off the dock, swam to the raft. I slept in the tent near the river, and my sister Ruth later told me that she saved me from drowning when I fell off the dock when I was 3, and I even sang in the boys' choir at the Presbyterian Church. And I worked at the age of 5 at the restaurant, washing dishes, being paid 25 cents a week. I went to high school in Brockville. Boy Scouts was on Thursdays and Bible study every Sunday. I had an interest in reading both fiction and non-fiction books, which I borrowed from the Brockville Library. And being a scout at St. Peter's Church in Brockville was a lot of fun. And I went camping with the group, and once 3 of us decided to go canoeing from Brockville to the Thousand Island Bridge in a leaky canoe. That sure was an adventure. In high school, I liked going to classes in physics, botany, and chemistry. I liked to be able to solve problems when there were systems involved. Classes that required me to memorize things were often troubling. I think I played every intramural sport available, and the best one I liked best was basketball, especially after my dad built me a basketball basket at the cottage to practice their long-distance shots. I worked at the restaurant washing dishes, ironing and drying linen and tablecloths and napkins, worked in the pantry, worked at the cash register, shoveled snow, and waited on tables at the restaurant, and played baseball and hockey at the waterfront Water Street outdoor rink in Tunnel Bay. Tennis was played at the Rowing Club tennis court with my lifetime friend Norm Lucier. His lifetime win was 99-1 sets in his favor. One of the things I liked doing best was going to see cowboy movies at the Old Regent Theatre on Saturdays with Valerie, my sister, where we saw Roy Rogers and Gene Autry movies. In the fall, we played touch football on the lawn in front of the courthouse, and I learned how to dance when rock and roll music was at the top of the music charts. It was a fun time during my teenage years, and many times I found myself staring out the windows of the restaurant, thinking about what it might be like not being tied to a restaurant. After the death of my father in 1959, I decided I would stay in Brockville for at least a year to help my mother run the restaurant because we were in debt to the tune of $120,000. I also decided that I would like to see what it was like to work in an industrial plant, and I applied to work at Phillips Cable, delivering the mail, and later working as a technician in the plastics control lab. You know, it sure opened my eyes that there was a different world out there which was very different than my life here at the restaurant. Regarding my boat racing career, at that time I bought my first and only A-stock hydroplane, which could go about 60 miles an hour, and I sanctioned raced it in both the United States and Canada. I still love the sound of the motor, the smell of the gas, and the wind in my face. But during that 1 year, I had the standing of being the 18th best in Canada. That might sound pretty good, but at that time, there was not that many people who raced A-stock hydros. I still have that longing to get in a race boat and drive it, but I know that my sight is not as good as it should be, and surely I would get hurt. I remember the day it happened, and Mother taking me to Ottawa to register at the Eastern Ontario Institute of Technology, and getting a room in a rooming house on Lyon Street, and buying me some drafting equipment and a slide rule before leaving me to fend for myself in Ottawa. It was here I met Harry Friend, Ken London, and others who had an influence on the rest of my life, as well as my professors, and in particular Morris Ryant, who taught me the science of chemistry for 3 years. I went to EOIT. I graduated in 1963, being one of the 9 people who graduated out of the 21 people who started. And I also got infected with spinal meningitis during my 2nd year of going to school, and worked during my first 2 summer holidays at DuPont and also at the restaurant. In 1961, the restaurant was doing well, and Mom incorporated the business and appointed members of the family to its board of directors. I became vice president at the age of 21. In 1963, I got a job at Brockville Chemicals in Maitland, but only lasted 10 days, and I quit because they lied to me. And in September of that year, I decided to go to Carleton University and got a job there as an assistant, as well as taking some classes. In the fall of 1963, I spent the $1,000 that Dr. Williams, who delivered me at birth, gave me so I could go to Carleton U. With interest at another $200, it was enough at that time to do this. Plus, it was a time when the business of the restaurant was good and the debt problem was quickly going away. It was a most interesting experience, and by the time spring arrived, I had enough education and luckily found a job in Ottawa as a technologist working at Bell Northern Research Labs in the Solid State Physics Division at $3,600 a year. I now had enough of formal education and was about to enter some of the most challenging and creative times of my life. If you remember, it was the time of the Vietnam War, and color televisions were becoming popular. John Denver was hot in the music circles. There was a race to place the first man on the moon. The word internet would soon become as common as the word bread, and Toronto was dying to get new streetcars made in Canada. And for some reason, I was going to be part of it all. My first job at Bell Northern Research was part of a team of scientists, engineers, technologists, and technicians working to make the first integrated circuit in Canada. And this we did in about 1965. This was a time of the great race in the communications industries to make things smaller and faster. When my mother asked me what I was doing, because it was a complicated process, all I could tell her was that I was a shrink. I also was working with Tony Jervison, who later left BNR and got a job at Motorola in Arizona. I found out that Tony had a son, who's Steve Jervison, a venture capitalist who's now on the board of SpaceX and Tesla. In about 1967, I saw an advertisement in the Globe and Mail one day advertising a job in Toronto for a person knowledgeable in microelectronic process engineering, and I decided to apply. The interview was in Montreal, and because everything that they wanted I knew, I got the job and was paid about $10,000 per year. At Collins Radio, we'd be developing a UHF ground-to-air radio to be used in the Vietnam War. I was part of the development team assigned to produce the microcircuits for this radio, and later another VHF military radio, which was used in Canada and Quebec during the Quebec crisis in 1970. The time spent learning at Bell Northern Research had finally paid off. It was later that we found out it was a high possibility that some of the circuits that we made were used in the Apollo communication system, which were used on the NASA manned missions to the moon. It was a job requiring looking through a microscope 40% of the time and solving processing issues in a 10,000-foot clean facility which employed as many as 45 people, and I was providing technical support. Another interesting process I was assigned during my time at Collins was the planning of the Canadian development of a cardiac pacemaker. Unfortunately, although the computer financial evaluation showed that this project had extremely high merit, it was not a military device, and Collins denied the project to proceed. I really enjoyed working at Collins Radio. The work was certainly interesting and challenging, and the guys and gals I worked with were amazing. It's also provided me with some trips to Dallas, Newport Beach, and Cedar Rapids in Iowa, and memberships to the ASTM and American Society of Physics. At that time, I bought a home in Pickering for $28,000, and my daughter Susan was born. Recently, I checked to see the value of that price of that house, and it was now $680,000. But my job at Collins was not to be the lifetime experience, and the microelectronic manufacturing and development areas were closed. And they asked if I wanted to work at their division in Dallas. I refused, and I was on my way to work at ITT Cannon as their new market development manager in Whitby, Ontario. I only worked for ITT for about a year or so. They gave me a windowless office and access to a president's secretary. My job was to find new markets for the facility, and that included General Motors, the biomedical electronic market, and to try to introduce fiber optic technology to the communications companies here in Canada. It was a huge job, and one of the highlights of my position was that I met Dr. Charles Kao, who later in 2009 won the Nobel Prize for developments of fiber optics. It was an amazing job. I met a countless number of people and provided a background of experience enabling me to win a job as head of market research for Canada's Urban Transportation Development Corporation, later known as UTDC, which were developing Toronto's new streetcars and bidding on worldwide urban transportation services. I now had a job that paid me $33,000 per year, and this was in the late 1970s. In 1975, there was a huge fire at the Riviera Hotel in Brockville, which was to the east of the New York restaurant. Luckily, the restaurant did not suffer any major damage, but the hotel was destroyed. This fire would stimulate influence changes in the lives of the Lor family and bring me back home to run the restaurant. I can't really remember exactly when or how it happened, but I sure remember it happening, like driving on the weekends back to my house in Pickering to cut the grass and await the sale of my house, which later sold for about $68,000. And fighting the high interest rates, which could have bankrupted the restaurant, working 120 hours a week and meeting customers like author Pierre Burton, Vice President Mondale, Bobby Hull and his family. It was the age of when the internet was first starting, and I bought my first home computer. I always had a lot to do at the restaurant, cottage, and mother's rental property in Brockville, as every day I would open the restaurant at 8 o'clock and close it around midnight, while trying in the afternoon to take a nap. Being at the restaurant and all those hours created a way to become acquainted with the staff of the Recorder and Times, local lawyers, and also the members of the Brockville City Council, who were regular customers. What also was happening was that we were suing the owner of the Revere Hotel property for causing damage to our restaurant building, which was finally settled in court after 4 years, and then another 2 years went by before we could actually get some money. It was a tough few years, especially because Mother had borrowed money to renovate the restaurant, and the high bank interest rates were killing us. During the 1980s and 1990s, I became interested in volunteering as part of our public relations process, and sitting on boards would be a good way to maintain family presence in the community. My first public appointment was to chair the steering committee for the construction of the present Memorial Center. It was followed by an appointment that was to be vice chairman and head of the finance committee for the YMCA, who was struggling with a $120,000 debt. After 2 years, we solved the financial problem, and presently Brockville still has a very nice YMCA. I was noticing that the Brockville tourism industry was not in the best shape at this time, and we needed leadership direction. So, with the help of St. Lawrence College, formed the Brockville and District Tourist Advisory Board, which I chaired. At one evening at a meeting, it was suggested by MP Bob Runciman that we take on the formation of a small shoulder festival to stimulate Brockville's tourism season. Myself and Councillor John Fielding chaired Brockville's first Riverfest Festival, which lasted every summer for 27 years. I also noticed that to have a good tourism economy, we need to have good restaurants with skilled and knowledgeable staff. The owner of a restaurant on Apple Street and I approached for help from St. Lawrence College, and they created a 2-year hospitality and culinary arts course to help, and it certainly provided the professionalism needed so that Brockville could become a destination tourist attraction in Ontario. I also noticed that many festivals and special events in North America were failing because of financial success. I decided what was needed would be to have a conference on festivals and special events, and I went to the college with the idea, which was accepted. We had that conference paid for by the Rideau Lakes Thousand Island Tourist Committee, which I was vice president, and the Canadian Federation of Tourism of the Canadian government. I was fortunate to get Disney to come to Canada and be the keynote speaker. It was the first time Disney had gone outside their space to speak about their secrets of maintaining their success in festivals and special events, and I was thrilled by the success of this conference, which had attracted an audience from all over North America. As a result of the success of the conference, I wrote a booklet on the importance of the use of festivals and special events for the Canadian Tourism Association, which is still used today. And that means I was also approached to be chair of the Business Advisory Committee at the college, advising on future courses to be taught there. I accepted the appointment. The last 2 committees I was involved with was being a member of the Brockville Police Services Board, which led me to be the representative for Eastern Ontario and the Ontario Association of Police Services Board. At one meeting, I spoke to the group of leaders on the oncoming impact of the Internet on police services. The Brockville Police Services Board has assigned me to the task of writing their strategic plan, which was enacted until the year 2000. It was the first such document which provided details for governance of the board. In 1988, I was approached by Stu Williams, who wanted me to advise and help him get elected at Brockville City Council. I accepted his offer and began to help him. We used telemarketing machine to ask citizens what changes they wanted, and we were successful in capturing the most votes for a councillor that election. It was a remarkable victory, and Stu served on council for 16 years. Stu Williams and I became amazing friends, and which led to the creation in 1991 on public television of the Williams Lor Report. We produced and directed 96 TV programs and a public meeting. The Williams Lor Report interviewed persons who were influential in our community. In the beginning, I thought that if we could start something as massive as Riverfest, we should be able to start a tourism consulting business. Well, what we found out was we could supply consulting advice in the form of market research to organizations and businesses seeking research information, such as the Thousand Islands International Bridge Authority, whom we personally consulted for interviewing 13,000 people to determine their spending habits at festivals and special events in the Thousand Islands area, which resulted that they received millions of dollars in grant money from New York State. And the AMEO Agricultural Group, who we supplied market information for agriculture products grown in Eastern Ontario, which stimulated the farmers in this area to believe there were a massive amount of local people who would buy locally grown products. But it was not enough to support our consulting efforts. We decided that what we had to do is to supply unique web design, and we were successful in the 1980s and 90s, selling web designing services to companies all over North America. This was done until competitive companies provided the service with templates for free. However, 4 sites I designed proved exceptional for the clients, which included Island View, B&B, the Brockville Farmers Market, and Shashashabee Mando Agency in Quebec, and our own TDC's Farm Gate, which has been seen from all over the world with over 2.6 million hits so far. To provide more income, we also started selling day trips, tour trips, bus trips to Montreal, Quebec City, and the vineyards of Prince Edward County. And for every bus, it was fully booked, and our customers were fully satisfied with days out touring Canada. Serving the tourism industry is really a lot of fun and very satisfying profession. In 1990, I bought an old apartment building, which was built in about 1865, which has 5 apartments that needed lots of work but still had tenants. It is located right on King Street East in Brockville and overlooks the St. Lawrence River. It was perfect for what I needed, and so my daughter Susan and I had a place of our own to live. Over the years, furnaces have been replaced, walls painted, floors sanded, electric outlets updated, fireplace replaced, roofs painted and fixed, and windows replaced. It's my home now. I love living here, and it's provided me with an income and a place of solitude to think about the past and hope for the future. You might ask me, what other memorable trips have you taken? And there are 3 trips that stand out in my life. My trip to New York with my sister Gloria. My trip to Beijing with Ruth 3 weeks after the Tiananmen Square massacre. And my car trips to Canada's northern coast to the Cree village of Shashashabee, where I was invited to record the building of a northern Cree teepee and their website, and which I did. All these places are unique and most memorable, and I advise those seeing this video worth visiting. My closing words to my history come from the Bible, which I found that is written about hope for the future, and it reads, "Instruct those who are rich in this present world not to be conceited, or to fix their hope on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy. Good night.